Hello, everyone. Welcome to Northpointe.
Hello, everyone.
You always make fun of. It's like my phone voice, you know.
That's right. This is your podcast voice.
This is my podcast.
Just be Sylvia.
Voice. This is. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to Northpointe Plus. This is our podcast that just kind of goes over the message. This
just kind of goes over the message like it's no big deal.
Yeah, well, we're just talking. Right? We're just talking. That's what we say. It's episode 103 today.
That's
so we've
crazy.
been doing this for a minute.
Yeah, that means like next week is 2 full years.
Oh yeah.
52.
Yeah.
Times 2.
That's crazy.
Math class is tough.
Yeah. Not for you, for me. I'm not a numbers guy. But yeah, so Rick, you spoke on Sunday, so why don't you just...
Nothing else to talk about before we jump right into the message?
I mean, I'm sure I'll have more to add
Okay.
to the question.
All right.
Well, unless you want to say anything.
Well, I'll do a shout out.
Okay.
As you're watching this, if you're watching on Tuesday, it's the day before my 42nd wedding anniversary.
Oh, yeah.
So happy anniversary, Miss Deb.
Yay. We love
On
Deb.
Wednesday.
Yay,
Yep.
Deb.
Long time ago.
Well, I feel like you should tell us like a quick story on like how you met or something, or like a funny story about you guys.
I've told before that once we started dating, she said, "You need to know, I don't want to get married. I don't want to have kids. Certainly don't want to marry a pastor." Yeah. And
God had different plans.
That's right. That's right. I figured I could talk her out of the first two. And I didn't want to be a pastor. I hadn't planned on being a pastor. Excuse me, at that point. So, yeah. No, we actually met doing ministry stuff, which was cool. So we went to a Christian college. We traveled on the weekends. I was in a male quartet.
Oh, yep.
She was the accompanist for the male quartet. And
love at first sight.
No, because we knew each other our freshman year.
Oh, so it's more like friends.
Yeah. We just spent more time together. But this was actually, I tell this sometimes. Her roommate, her freshman year, was the accompanist for the male quartet our freshman year. So I was in a different group. Our freshman year, she wasn't in a group. And her roommate, during that year, dated all 4 guys in the male quartet at one point in time. So the reason that Deb played for us, that she was our accompanist, was because they didn't want any of that drama, and Deb didn't have any desire to date anyone. So,
so there
and she
you
was,
go.
yeah. So, but it worked out for me.
Yeah. Oh,
Yep.
yeah. I mean, heck, I love Deb. Team Deb all the way. I mean, you too, but you know. Not like it was not you, but man, I love Deb. She's just so
She's
sweet.
good.
I know. One day, I don't know if she watches these. Does she watch these?
She doesn't usually watch these. So
I
everyone,
would love for her to get on a podcast one time, but I think it's going to take some major convincing.
well, we'll have to figure out some time to do it. You'll have to trick her to
Turn all the lights on, be like, "Hey, we're just talking."
We're
Let's
just talking.
pretend,
That's
and
right.
I'm over here hitting record.
Yep.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead and just review a little bit?
Yeah. So what's interesting, I think, and I didn't really say this yesterday, because this is like this was the 4th message from Job. So, and it really is God's response back to Job after Job has said, "I don't get this. All this stuff, these horrible things have happened to me, and I haven't done anything wrong." And Job's friends have said, "Yeah, you have," and he said, "No, I haven't." Finally, in the passage that we looked at on Sunday, chapter 38, 39, 40, 41, a little bit of 42, God responds. And so it really is the climax of Job's story. This coming Sunday, we finish Job, and it really is kind of the epilogue. It's like, okay, after God has said his say, what happens after that? And so it really is kind of the final statement, and to just really boil it down, God basically says to Job, "Hey, put on your big boy pants, and answer me some questions. Where were you when the earth was created? Do you have even a clue about how the earth works? How animals function, why they do what they do? I'm the one who created all that. Sit down and shut up." And it's not a sit down and shut up like smacking him upside the head, although God is smacking him upside the head. It really is, hey, look, I'm God and you're not. and that's enough. And I think the whole point of Job is that God says, yeah, I know that you suffer, and I know that, and I care, but I can see things that you can't. And somehow that seems, I think, kind of hollow to us. It seems unfulfilling to us. And I think maybe that's the point, that because it feels unfulfilling to us, that's the whole point of God saying, Job, where were you when all these things happened? I am who I am. And end of paragraph, end of story, drop the mic.
Mic drop, yeah. When you said that, I thought that was so funny. When you
and really,
then God kind of just drops the mic.
Look, you don't.
It is. It's like final, like where it's like at the end, it's like crickets.
Yep. And that's what Job says in both places. At one point, Job says, "Okay."
Yep, I shouldn't have said anything.
and then God says, "Okay, put on your big boy pants. I've got some more questions for you. I'm not quite
we weren't done
yet."
here.
Yeah. And God is just reinforcing that He is God. And
that video was cool.
Oh, good.
I liked that video.
Yeah. I thought it was. I just thought it was really powerful. If you're watching the podcast and didn't watch the message, actually you can go to the app notes, and I put the link in the app notes, okay. so you can find it if you want to go back and look at it again. It's it really is.
It's just funny. Like, I think it's just cool with the imagery too, because it's like one of those things where, like, yeah, we've seen these video clips, and and you even said some of the questions beforehand, and I was like, oh snap! But then listening to them all together and seeing the video and everything, I don't know. Maybe I'm just a very visual person, but I thought that was cool. Helped me kind of like put it into perspective of.
Well, and when you read it, it's like question after question after question, and it starts not to become white noise, but it's easy to lose your attention. Yeah. And the video really helped capture. Oh yeah, awesome, man! How did God think of ostriches? And the tigers walking. Oh yeah, that's just really cool. And then when you start looking at the pictures of the universe, that's like, yeah, we're pretty small.
Yeah, yep. I may or may not have quoted the "put on your big boy pants" to my husband later that day. I was like, hey, just like Rick said, and it was totally
gird up your loins, Jacob.
No, I know. It was funny. It was like a total joke. It wasn't even anything like serious, but I was just like, hey, you heard Rick today. Pull up your big boy pants, like whatever. It's pretty funny.
I mean, in the original language, that really is the visual. Like, gird up your loins. It's pull on your pants.
Oh, that's funny. That's what I think Jake always says, like, there's a sense of humor, in things where it's just like people miss out on that, or like when you read it wrong or you don't know all those little. It's like, it's so cool to hear about that. It makes it so much fun. But so our first question is when is it appropriate to ask questions or seek answers of God for the situations we're in, and when does it become wrong?
That's a great question, because when you look at Scripture, there are some times that people question God and God just thwacks them, and there are other times that people ask God questions, and He just gives a very direct and clear, gentle response. And then there are times when God gives a response that's at the God level, kind of like with Job. And I would say that I think the issue is not when you can ask God questions, when you can try and get answers from God, it's how. It's all about your attitude more than about the circumstances. So I think when we cry out to God in our brokenness, when we have questions in our brokenness, man, God's ready to respond to that. If nothing else, for the Holy Spirit to come alongside and just be with us as we ask those questions. When we, out of an attitude of arrogance, as if we know more than God, that's, I think, when it's like, you know what, you better just sit down and shut up and read Job 38, 39, 40, and 41 again.
Yeah. Do you think it's fair to say too, I kind of had it in my head like a teacher when they ask, or when they say, like, don't just come right to me, like, did you look for an answer? So do you think it would be like kind of comparable, like when people need to, the first thing is complaining to God instead of like going to read the Bible, or like searching for answers, you know what I'm saying? Like, do you think that is kind of like a fair thing to say too? Like, well, are you, like how, because you said too in your message, like you have to want that relationship,
Yep.
not just the
Not,
complaining.
yeah,
or,
yeah. It is really easy for us to pray and to just pray for all the stuff that we need and to not listen to God, listen for God's voice.
Yeah.
It's easy for us to read scripture and just kind of check it off as a to-do list kind of thing, rather than to really try and get who God is and understand what he's doing, how he's working, all those kinds of things. I think that it really is about our attitude, and that when we have honest questions, I think even with Job, he was saying, I don't get this, but I think the difference between like chapter 3 and chapter 37 is at chapter 37, Job has become so focused on himself. That sounds horrible to say, because his kids are dead, his wealth is gone, his health is gone, but he is in such despair that he can't see anything beyond himself. And I think when we come authentically to God and ask questions, that's okay. God is never, no matter what, is never threatened by our questions. But when we're arrogant, it's like I can remember when my kids were little. Sometimes, well,
they have the audacity to make it seem like they know better.
Yes, it's kind of like, sophomores in college or in high school. Sophomore means wise fool. They think they know everything. As a sophomore, you come back after your freshman year, you think you know everything, and it's like, sit down and shut up because you don't know squat. So yeah. I think it's all about attitude.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it too, and I don't think it's something that we need to be like worried about, or like, I think it's something to pay attention to, is like your attitude when you're asking questions, because that's what the question is. Like it says like, when does it become wrong? But also like the amount of times we mess up. Like, because like I'm even thinking too, like when I have been like very sad or something, or like, and you just are sitting there like, why is this happening? And it's like, he's not going to get mad at me for asking why when you're like heartbroken, crushed, like, whatever. But it's just kind of like, I don't know, attitude check. It's a good thing to remember.
Yeah.
So, and then our next question, if God has a reason for bad circumstances, how do we know when and how to assist without interfering with God's plans?
The implication in that question is that we can mess up God's plans.
Oh yeah, that's there you go.
And we can't. We can miss out on being a part of God's plan, but we can't mess him up. So I think if God is allowing us to experience pain, suffering, whatever that is, and we do everything that we can to just try and get out of it without trying to hear from God first, we miss what God's trying to give us. We miss, this sounds funny, but C.S. Lewis talks about pain as a gift, the gift of pain. We miss what we could learn through that. And so we need to not just try and get out of it, but to ask first what God's trying to say to us. I say to the staff periodically, when people complain, when somebody comes at you and is giving you grief about something that's going on at church, something you're responsible for, this is true in the workforce, any place. This is what I've learned over the last 40 years. I have 4 questions that I ask myself when that happens, when somebody complains, when they're angry with me, that kind of thing. The first is there truth in what they say? So, if somebody says, that was the worst sermon ever, I think the first question is there truth in that? And so it makes me say, okay, did I do my study? Did I do my prep? Did I do? So that first question, is there truth in what they say? Even if they said it horribly, is there truth in that? The second thing is, what's God trying to teach me in this? So they might be angry. They might be way out of line. But if God's trying to teach me humility through the process, I need to be sensitive to that answer, to be humble. And so is there truth in what they say? What is it that God's trying to teach me through this? The third question is, I always say, is this the real thing that they're upset about? Because sometimes people are upset about, they may say they're upset with this particular thing, and that's not really it at all. They just don't have the courage or the it's too uncomfortable for them to talk about what really is at stake. And so to try and identify whether that's the real thing or it's something else is important. And then the fourth thing that I always ask is this, does this have to do with, is there something else going on in their life that might cause this reaction? And it doesn't really have anything to do with what they're talking about at all. Yeah. It's not related to church at all. So somebody who gets really mad about something that is happening at work, but they're having trouble at home. It's not a work issue at all. It's if you go through the whys, right. It's something else. And so I think that the question with when things are bad, when we're suffering, I don't think we can get in the way of what God has, but we can miss it. And so I think the answer to that, the short version to that long answer is, God, what are you trying to teach me through this?
Yeah, and I think that that's good too, because like this kind of gives you something, you can like run through that with other people, especially when you're heated about something, that somebody comes up and tells you. But also, like, as you were talking, it made me think of like, because some people just say, well, don't listen to them. But that, like, so what you're saying, like, that kind of goes against that.
Yeah, I think you have to listen to them because God may be speaking through them.
Yeah, and so it helps you,
because
like...
God even spoke through a donkey.
So really?
You never know. You never know where his truth's going to come from.
But also, it's kind of like you get to listen to it and pick through it. You get to learn about yourself, learn about them. And then also, though, it helps you move on from that instead of holding a grudge or whatever. So like I think that's pretty cool. And I think you can use that in lots of other places. Yeah. Like, I mean, even in home life when you're talking about teenagers or
your spouse
or young kids. Honestly, like this, I think that is really something that a tool people could use.
Yep.
But okay, so given this discussion of God's response to Job, how do we as Christ followers make sense of what we hear about climate change and the control we have as humans?
I love this question because if you read Job 38 and 39, God says over and over again, oh, you think you can control stuff? Sit down and shut up. You can't do anything. So without being really too political, I do think I'm going to be cautious here because I know people have different opinions, but I do think to think that we as humans can mess up the world or the universe that God created is pretty arrogant. And when you look at the volume of, is there an impact that comes from humans? I think so. I don't think it's a lasting impact unless God wants it to be.
Right.
If God is planning for Jesus' return to come when the ozone is evaporated, let's evaporate the ozone. And if that's not God's plan, it's not going to evaporate.
Yep.
So
it sounds like you heard it here first. Rick doesn't recycle. He hates the planet.
No, that's not true.
I'm just kidding.
But no, that's a great question because I actually
big recycler.
Yeah, well, I think when you look at what God calls us to do, we are called to be stewards of the earth. So we need to do everything that we can to take what God has given us and to be a good steward of it. Yeah. I don't think that the climate change stuff. I actually the podcast, I guess we talk more about what we really feel and think than I do on a Sunday morning than I'd say on a Sunday morning. But I don't think that I think that the climate. I think that there is climate change. I think it's cyclical. When we were in Iceland in 2013, we were talking to one of the Icelandic guys. he talked about the climate change and what they've discovered in Iceland because of the layers of ice and permafrost and that kind of stuff. And he said, "Oh, we can go back through and we can see where there have been times just like this, where the climate has changed, and it's cyclical. It happens every several hundred years or whatever, 1,000 years, or whatever it is, and so it takes off and goes from there." God's in charge. Yeah. We can trust him.
Okay, don't make fun of me. Okay, and I know that I'm young, and everybody always says Sylvia's young. She doesn't know what these things are. The West Wing.
The West Wing is in the White House. It's where the president does his business.
Yeah, but and you said earlier it was a TV show.
It is. It was a TV show. Yes, with Martin Sheen. He was the president.
That much.
So what's the question?
Well, I don't know what it is. So I guess it's just a TV show, and you mentioned it on Sunday.
Yeah, there is. There is an episode of The West Wing, and I was not a West Wing fan. Although we lived in D.C. for 20 years, I love the whole political environment, all that kind of stuff.
Did we figure out when it came out, or like when it was?
I think it would have.
Yes.
It would have been in the early 2000s.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Somewhere in there. But Martin Sheen plays the president. Rob Lowe is one of his staffers, that kind of thing. And in this one, in one of the seasons, I don't even know what, but one of the people who works for the president, who has had a significant influence on him, is killed by a drunk driver. And they do the funeral in the National Cathedral in Maryland, which is a place that we used to go to. We used to take people to, that kind of thing. And Martin Sheen, after the funeral is done, everyone leaves, and Martin Sheen, the president, is in the National Cathedral, and he basically just rails at God. And in it, the reason that that the phrase, when I heard it, saw it, whatever, I thought, oh, that's really interesting. He calls God a feckless thug, an uncaring tyrant kind of thing. And I think that that's the perspective of many people that they have of how God treats Job, that he is a feckless thug. And that, I mean, the character in that episode is so upset with God because he's done so much good for the country. He's done so many good things, and yet his good friend dies senselessly because of a drunk driver. So
that stuck out, and you said like you weren't even really a fan of it.
No, I didn't watch it that much, but I did. They say that episode is one of the best episodes in all of television history. It's really, really powerful. In it, again, just all of the little nuanced things that express oftentimes the way that we feel about God's, how distant God feels sometimes. He's there. He rails at God. He lights a cigarette, takes a couple puffs on it, and grinds it out on the floor of the National Cathedral. And it's like, wow.
Yeah, he needed to put on your big boy pants talk.
Yeah, well, he needed to read Job 38, 39, 40, and 41. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so then, like, in that talk that we, we're keep joking, the big boy pants talk, there's like lots of all the questions that God says, and there's lots of animals in there too. Yeah. And so, like, is there a deeper meaning behind those animals? So there's ostrich, horse, eagle, hawk, tiger, wild goats, donkeys, and oxen, wild.
Yeah, if you read down through that and try and just, you can read it and kind of like the video, picture those animals, which is cool. But theologians have read meaning into lots of the different kinds of animals, and which is just kind of interesting. That most of the animals that are there are wild animals. And animals that don't have courage, they just act. Horses are one of the animals that are there, and horses actually have the ability to overcome their circumstances Like you can teach a horse. Well, at the time that this would have been written, horses are used in battle, and so there's loud noises going off, all kinds of stuff that can distract the horses in the midst of battle, and a horse can continue to fight, continue to move forward all the time. So there is this sense in which sometimes the circumstances control the animal, but sometimes the animals can control the circumstances, and that has some relevance to us in terms of sometimes the circumstances can control us, and sometimes we can take action and impact the world around us. We can be thoughtful. We can take measured action. We can do all those kinds of things. I think that when you look at the animals there, it's just really interesting. I when I was studying this, it's just amazing to me that an ostrich can run faster than a horse.
Oh yeah, they're crazy, and they're like dangerous too. They'll kill you. We were talking about I was up north this past weekend. We saw one at a zoo, and I'm like, man, I don't know if I just haven't seen an ostrich in a while, but those things are crazy.
We saw them in Kenya, and they're just out peaceful, just doing their thing. But if they take off and go, they're like, they can go
ride them. They say humans can ride them.
And it was, I mentioned in the message, but it's just really interesting to me that they're so fast, but they don't hide their eggs.
Yeah.
They lay their eggs wherever, in dirt, in the middle of the road. And as soon as they hatch, they don't pay any attention to them.
Yeah.
It's just very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And then the flip side of that, one of the first ones that it says is, Job, do you have any idea where the mountain goats go to have babies, or how long they carry their babies? And Job had to be going, blah, blah, blah. And so now, we could look it up on the internet and say,
there's been studies now.
Yeah. But if you think about it, you've got those goats that are living on mountains that can walk on a tiny ledge in the mountain, and they're having babies up there. It's God's pretty incredible in terms of what he created and what they can do.
Yeah, and those are almost like questions that little kids ask, and I love those. We're like, how did you think of that? But then it's funny because sometimes parents are like, I don't know. Yeah. And so I just figured that's kind of what it reminded me of. Is
Yeah. I don't know if it's just my mind and the way it works, but in the message when I talked about God conceived those things before they were created. It's not like God created them and then they kind of just developed into this amazing thing. Yeah. No, God conceived the look of the ostrich and an elephant and
what they do and how they
how they interact and how they reproduce and all that kind of, it's very interesting.
Yeah,
God's
think so
big.
Too. Yeah, and then it makes you feel like
Yep.
Okay, and I think that everybody who's watching maybe is really wanting you to talk about the dinosaur comment that you said on stage. I was like, oh snap,
Well, let me just read that passage.
Because have you ever talked about that before?
About dinosaurs? No. Yeah. But lots of people think lots of different things. Obviously,
I want to hear what you think.
Well, I don't know, because it's hard to know exactly what God was talking about.
Sure.
I should have had this ready to go. Sorry about that.
That's, I think, a question that a lot of people have, though, about dinosaurs. I think I've even asked Jake Howard that maybe before, or something. I don't know if it was in a life group or what. Just that, what about dinosaurs, man?
Answers in Genesis is an organization that tries to make sense of the Bible and science in a really cool way. Ken Ham, some people love what he does, some people don't love it. There are some interesting things that there are places in Texas that have dinosaur fossils with human feet in the dinosaurs. So it's not like the dinosaurs existed before there was man. I think that they coexisted. My personal belief is that the dinosaurs, when the flood came, it took care of it wiped out the canopy, the firmament that Scripture talks about, and at that point, animals couldn't get as big as they were once. But this is let's see. Let me just read this. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins, what power in the muscles of its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar, the sinews of its thighs are close knit. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like rods of iron. It ranks first among the works of God, yet its maker can approach it with his sword. Under the lotus plants it lies, hidden among the reeds in the marsh. And so, like, when I think about the brontosaurus, and I'm not a dinosaur guy, but like, what was you probably didn't watch it, you're too young. There was a kids movie about dinosaurs with cute characters, but that was long before your time. It was when my kids were little.
Wait, are you talking about like the Land Before Time?
Yeah, Land Before Time. Yeah,
I know what you're talking about. Not that young.
So the dinosaurs in there, how they characterize that. That picture that's there is like of these giant animals that are hidden in the marsh and able to do their things and are huge.
Sorry to interrupt your train of thought, but it just kind of makes me think too, like, it was just another thing that he mentions, and like in the other, like, he's not describing what a hawk is, or like or like a tiger. So it's just one of those things. Yeah, like that's just what it was.
And the word behemoth, I mean, that's a transliteration of the word. It's like, it's this really, really large animal, and we don't know what it was. So,
do you ever hear people say behemoth as like a?
Yeah,
I say that. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's so weird.
So like humongous or whatever.
Yeah, like giant.
Giant something. Yeah.
Oh, and then Job 41, Leviathan.
Yeah, Leviathan. Let's see. This is Let me just read some of this, because this is crazy. Can you pull in Leviathan with a fish hook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose, or pierce its jaw with a hook? Will it keep begging you for mercy? Will it speak to you with gentle words? Will it make an agreement with you for you to take it as your slave for life? Can you make it a pet like a bird, or put it on a leash for your girls in your house? Will traders barter for it? Will they divide it among the merchants? Can you fill its hide with harpoons, or its head with fishing spears? If you lay a hand on it, you will remember the struggle and never do it again. Sometimes I talk about what I'm reading. I this last year read Moby Dick.
Oh, I thought about that when you were talking about that on stage.
It sounds like a whale, because all of the stuff that's described any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it's overpowering. No one's fierce enough to rouse it. Who's able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. It's the fight against the whale, the whalers that would take in a whale. When in Moby Dick, when it describes what they experienced in taking down a whale, it was a mammoth undertaking that was life-threatening from the word go. They just didn't know what was going to happen, and it took a whole team of people. And so this concept of, oh, what, you're so smart, you can go take a whale out by yourself. Yeah. Let's hear it. And then it goes down into. It says, I won't fail to speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coats of armor, its 2 layers of skin? Who dares open the doors of its mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between them. It's describing the skin of this animal that protects itself. Now, just a second. Let me flip out to rats. Let me just change translations here, because this. This is what's really interesting. Verse 18 says this: when it sneezes, it flashes light. Its eyes are like the red of dawn, Lightning leaps from its mouth. Flames of fire flash out. Smoke streams from its nostrils like steam from a pot heated over burning rushes. Its breath would kindle coals, for flames shoot from its mouth. What's that sound like?
Dragon.
A fire-breathing dragon.
And, yeah, that's pretty crazy. I think it's interesting because, people say, well, oh, that comes from, dragons or, a fantasy folklore or whatever. But I think a lot of that is influenced, actually, by the Bible. Because I read fantasy books, I've read before. And I've said this before on the podcast, too, that so many, where I'm like, I've read this before, and it was in the Bible.
Yeah,
so many are, what's Lord of the Rings? What's that guy's name? Tolkien?
Tolkien.
Who, that was,
Yeah.
So it's just, that's kind of cool. So do you really think it's a dragon? Or are you just saying it sounds like a dragon?
It certainly describes what what we would call a fire-breathing dragon. Some theologians would say, this is wisdom literature, it's poetry,
Yeah,
and
I was
so
gonna ask that too.
so it's maybe not as literal as like we read it.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I've just continued to toss in my mind is whether or not it actually describes something that did exist that doesn't exist any longer.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some animals that actually have stuff inside them that they can create heat and sparks inside their mouth.
Like what?
I read about it last week. It was like, oh yeah, there are animals that can do this.
Huh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want that in your backyard.
No.
While you're trying to camp.
No. So who knows? It's easy to get focused on the specifics and to miss the big picture.
Yeah.
The big picture is that God says, "Oh, you're so great. You think you could take down a fire?
Down.
Yeah, fire-breathing dragon down, or whatever this particular animal is. Some have said that it's this dinosauric alligator, crocodile kind of a thing, because of the way it describes its skin, and the armor plating and that kind of stuff. And others have said that, that's another kind of dinosaur. And again, I'm not a dinosaur guy, but they keep finding stuff. So
and I am so glad I was not in a time where there's dinosaurs. I mean, I know there's ups and downs of every lifetime, but I would be dead. I probably would have a heart attack from seeing one and just keel over right there. I'm not.
We don't want you to be Job's wife. That's for sure.
Yeah, right. There you go. Oh gosh. Well, this was a fun conversation. It kind of goes
stuff.
all over the place.
Yeah,
right?
make some comments. Right.
I want to hear. Yeah, I want to hear what other people think, because these are things kind of like you said. It's not this is not a big picture thing. This is just what people talk about and try to figure out. And that's what's fun is I don't have any hard and fast answers to these. I just like to hear what people think. So. People should leave comments or tell us, because it's interesting.
I can't remember what I was watching, or reading just in the last few weeks, and it stuck in my mind as I was thinking about Job. They continue to find animals that we never knew existed, or like fish in the bottoms of the sea that are that nobody ever knew that they were there, new species, and you think. God's creative ability goes beyond anything that we can even imagine.
Oh yeah.
And the big picture out of all this is, even in the midst of pain and suffering, God's God, and we can trust Him because He sees what we can't. So
He's got the whole world in His hands.
He's got the whole world in His hands. Oh, tell that story.
Oh yeah, so we had a foster son in our home for about 3 months, and he went to go live with his grandma, and it was pretty sad because it was good that he got to go live with family, but it was sad because
pretty sad. It was devastatingly heartbreaking.
And he was 2, and we got to have him for his birthday and do all these fun things. So and he was our first kid together for me and my husband. So it was just, we learned a lot. It was a lot of fun. But when he left, it was just man, things are just different now. The house is quiet, and one of my sister-in-law, my husband's one of his siblings, she texted me and him and said, all these very nice things about like, you guys were so great. And then she said, like, I just keep having this thought in my head that singing the song, he's got the whole world in his hands. And I was just like, yeah, I haven't thought of that song in a long time. I do like that song, like a little kid song. And I was like, thanks and whatever. And then you started saying it on Sunday, and I like looked at Jake and I'm like, are you hearing this too? Like, oh my goodness.
It was really interesting because when I was prepping the message, again, real heavy topic, and just trying to think, I need some places to just break stuff up a little bit so people can breathe. And it was interesting first service because when I started to sing that, there were some people that just kind of snickered initially, and then it was like, oh, there is a whole lot of truth in that little song.
Yep. I think we should do like a whole thing about songs, like little kid songs. Because I was gonna say, I know so many to this day where when we had our foster son, I'm like, I want to sing these songs, and like my mom did to me. So I'm asking her. She goes, oh gosh, I don't remember. So I'm like Googling them. But so it is truth, and it's good to remember because like I'm an adult now, and I'm like, I remember these songs, and like wow, it's planting that seed even when you're younger. So.
Reinforcing it. Yeah.
Well, thank you for everybody joining us today and sticking with us. And
dinosaur talk. Fire-breathing dragons.
Yeah. So this was episode 103. Hopefully you can stick out with us for our 2nd year anniversary of Northpointe.
That's right, next week.
Coming up.
Yeah.
So please like, subscribe, share, do all that, comment about your theory on dinosaurs.
There we go.
Nothing too heated, just opinions. But yeah, thanks, and we will see you Sunday.